Hello, everyone. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. I really appreciate you joining us today for this special edition as we talk about suicide prevention. September is Suicide Prevention Month, and I'm very honored to have young men as my guest to talk about this growing problem of suicide in the African American community. According to the CDC, the rate of suicide with African American men has doubled since 1980. That is very alarming to me because we talk about the number of African American men that are incarcerated, the number of African American men who are being shot by other people, law enforcement and other Black people. And now we're saying that the number of suicide deaths in the African American community has doubled. Joining me from Memphis is Ronnie Foster. He is a business owner in Memphis, and Ricardo Amando. Did I say your last name right, Ricardo?
Yes, ma'am.
From Milan, Tennessee. Thank you all very much for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's no problem. Thank you for inviting.
Yeah, one of the things in the news right now is Michael Williams, who was found dead in his apartment, a drug overdose. And sometimes I don't think we view drug overdoses as a form of suicide, but sometimes they are, and people don't leave notes. But the fact that one is disturbed enough to be using large amounts of substances. I think there was a rapper and two people last week who were found dead. They had been doing heroin and things. Are you surprised when you hear that this number is up?
You got it, Ricardo.
Oh no, I saw you start first, but as far as being surprised, I'm not really. Unfortunately, a lot of the stigma that's really behind suicide, especially when it comes to, or even mental health, especially when it comes to the African American community, does play a very huge role in that. When you have a lot of these different stereotypes getting put out there, it can have a lot of uneven ground and put a lot of things that would force someone like myself to internalize a lot of different situations, therefore not being able to express. So seeing the rise of that, especially within the African community, it's not too surprising. It is very sad, but it is not surprising just with the society that we're in today.
Ronnie?
I guess it's kind of hard to answer that question for me. You still there, Pam? Kind of went away.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just moving me out of the way so the focus could be on you.
Okay. I just
Technology.
wanted to make sure. So I guess from me growing up, I always look at it as BS, like before social media type deal, where when people were bullied at that point, it was just kind of like internally at their school, and that was always a stress for people who were bullied. But now it's such a global thing where if you're bullied, you're not only bullied at school, you're bullied nationwide, you're bullied nationally, you're bullied where people are posting on it and commenting at people that you've never met before. I think that plays a lot on a person's mental health, where the escapism now is on your phone. It's on your phone. Like everyone has their phone on them. They always looking at the feedback of what people are saying about them, people that they don't even know. So, now that bullying is cyber, it's hard to kind of put the toothpaste back in the tube because it's out. And I think that wears on the person. So it's not, I guess I hate to say it's not surprising because I understand how the number has doubled. I mean, because being Black it's always especially as I can speak from a Black male's perspective. I don't want to speak for all Black men, but I think that we're kind of conditioned to deal with certain societal points and what it comes with being this skin tone, especially someone who's as dark as myself or Ricardo. He can probably attest to it too. Is that you're always kind of conditioned to kind of deal with certain things, and this is just how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So once you start if for people that's younger than me, and I can put my age out there. I mean, I'm 35. I'll be 36 this year. So, but I can understand when people that are 12, 13, 14, 15, and they're getting teased about their skin color and getting checked and all that, and it goes global, it could be a weight.
Well, let me just say and apologize for any teasing that either of you have gotten. You are absolutely gorgeous. Your
Thank you.
skin tones are beautiful. And I am so sorry that we as a society, us,
Hmm.
have caused anybody to feel anything because of their skin tone. So, on behalf of everybody that acting silly about something like that, I
Well, I mean,
apologize.
yeah, I think
It's silly.
it's very silly, but I mean, I learned that people gonna talk about you. They're gonna find something to talk about you, and I just think at that point it was just. And my mom didn't know this until probably like 6 or 7 years ago that people would say something about about how dark I was, and I guess I can't sit up here and say that I went home with my head down about it. I never felt bullied. I will say that, but I can understand someone if they did.
Right, right. Now, understanding, and you said you never felt bullied, either of you ever contemplate suicide?
No,
Oh,
I haven't.
okay. So, oh well, not that that's a bad thing by any means. By all means, if you are able to live your life to the fullest and be able to see yourself in, have yourself in a position to where you don't feel those types of things, that is positive. That's great, and we want that for you. We definitely don't want to have that taken from you. But unfortunately, at least on my end, uh, I've experienced suicidal thoughts, and I have tried to commit suicide around when I was 14 and 15. And that was a different culmination of a lot of different things. Just not understanding me and depression, and not being diagnosed with clinical depression until much later, and a few different home situations that just weren't working well with me, and a few different things just everywhere else kind of built up to a certain point um, where I thought the way to escape a lot of pain, and just to not burden other people, or to just not have to feel the way that I was feeling, that was my way out. I feel like a lot of people get confused with suicide because it is such a tragic event that people think, oh, this person wanted to die. And I did not want to die. That wasn't my thing. My thing was I wanted to escape the situations that I was in, and not have to feel like I have to put on this front of, hey, I'm happy and I don't want people to worry about me, or hey, I'm all good. I don't want people to, have this particular impression, or I don't want to fall into the quote unquote like white stereotype of, oh, I'm just complaining, just making things seem bigger than what they were, not understanding that I really needed somebody there to hold my hand out. And like I said yesterday with your post, even though my vocabulary was a little bit off with the podcast yesterday, it took my pastor and a lot of self-care and a lot of self-discovery to really get me to a point where I was like, I love me and I love where I'm at, and I need to speak up, not just for myself, but for other people out there, especially for other African American men out there. Like you were saying, there's a lot of conditioning where depression is a white man's thing. We don't get depressed in the black community. That's not what we do. That's a white people thing. Or ADHD, that's just an excuse to take these particular pills, so that way people are getting hooked on this and that, not understanding that there's weight behind what the mindscape, or what your mental mindscape is looking like. It has a very big effect on you. So that's long story short, that's kind of my experience with that in that capacity. capacity. And
Ricardo, thank you for sharing that. Thank you, God, for putting the right people in your life to bring you to this point today. And Ronnie, as you were listening to that in your age group, 35, Ricardo's 25, if I'm not mistaken, 10
mhm,
years difference. And to hear, Ronnie, that young people between the ages of 5, African American children between the ages of 5 and 16, that's the number one cause of death, is suicide. Ronnie, what do you think happened in a 10-year time span?
I think, and kind of to piggyback on what Ricardo was saying, um, I think so. A brief story about my experience as far as what dealing with depression. This is what it was when I was 22. I want to say I was living in Atlanta, and now I didn't know this at the point at that time. It wasn't until years later that I looked back and said, "Oh, I was depressed." I guess it's Ricardo was saying, like we're not. Only time that black people are like, especially black men, like depressed is that you're about to commit suicide. Like, you must have been depressed or something like that to do that. So I never had those thoughts, but there is a level of depression that's you don't have to reach the point of wanting to commit suicide. It's you kind of just feel like you're in the funk. You
mhm,
know, yeah, it's just like everything was just, you could just like literally feel life kind of floating by. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my mom about, like I said, at this time it wasn't we weren't saying we weren't identifying it as depression but I could just look back and say, oh, that's what it was. Um, so you just like you said, you start to just kind of be more aware about the situations around and worry about what you can control. And because once you start trying to grasp things that are out of your control, you can get frustrated. You just get frustrated and like, oh, it's not working my way and blah blah blah. It's not going how I thought it should go. And to go, I don't want to sound like a old record beating on social media, but like when you're seeing you're seeing people highlights, like like if you're watching ESPN and you're seeing Michael Jordan highlights, you're not going to see any missed shots. You're not going to
Right.
see any turnovers. Right? You're going to see all the dunks, all the made baskets, all of that, all the steals, all the great plays he's made. So you would think that okay, he had a great game. However, sometimes when people, it's the same way when it goes to social media. People post the great points of their lives. So when someone else who's going through something, can look at that and like, oh man, I should be living like that, and I'm not living like that. Not knowing that the person behind their camera is living in the same situation. They just showing that 2 second part of the day that was probably a good day, a good part
Right,
of the day,
right,
or
right,
they're
right.
just probably
mhm.
just playing, just lying, or just playing a character for social media. So I think that that's it's like a perfect storm for a person who's battling with like some insecurities or still kind of trying to find their way, because there's so much information out now. And when you have so much information, that means there's so much bad information as well, because you could just always look up certain things and you don't know, in this day and age, it allows a person to just kind of say, oh, go this way or go that way. I think even before me, like my mom and dad's age, it was like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. Go down this road. This is how it's supposed to be. But now it's not like that. It's a little more fluid. And if you're not, but everyone is so judgy now because everyone has a voice now, that if you're that young and that young age, what's it, what was the age again, Pamela?
5 to 16.
It's still so impressionable. Like it's
Yeah.
still such a fragile. I mean, the mind is fragile from when you're 5 to 100, but just in that 5, 16 age, you're still like it's still forming, it's still growing. You still don't, certain things. What type of food you like, right? What's your fashion sense? What type of things you like with the world? What's your favorite subject in school? You're still trying to figure things like that out. But when you have so much outside noise, kind of judgy, this is how it's supposed to be, or just kind of a teasing type thing. And there's so many things that you got to feel like you got to try to control. And when you can't control that, you could just lose grasp, and you kind of can get lost, excuse me, lost in anything at that point.
And so thinking about all of the information, one of the big challenges that I'm reading about is the lyrics in some
Mhm.
of the songs. Like one of the lyrics that I saw was standing in the mirror with a nine at my brain, trying to do something just for the fame. And then one about jumping out a window, and the other one is I either slit my wrist or get my magnum. And these are songs people are dancing and twerking to, and not understanding those lyrics are imprinting in their psyche. How much do you think this music has played a role in it? I mean, if you can put music on to get you in the mood to worship and make love or whatever, you can put messages in music as well. I mean, this is so blatant that it's scary.
Yeah,
Mm,
I agree. I think that I mean, I music is powerful. Um, I mean, there are a lot of messages in music, I mean, whether it's love songs or suicidal songs. I do think that it gets a time where if you look at the I guess I would say evolution of rap, and this is just my theory. They might write this in books one day, so hey, this is where they got it from. But
hmm
Okay.
um, so if with rap, hip hop in this like late 70s, early 80s, once it started talking about, reflecting about what's going on in the black community, right? Um, and all the songs that was talking about, it's like a jungle sometimes, I wonder how I keep from going under. Like they saying things about what they're witnessing. But during that time where you had the crack epidemic that was going in the 80s, right? So you'll start hearing about like what rappers in the 90s are saying about dealing, because that's what they was experienced from their drug dealing phase. But what you're seeing now are the children of that, right? You're seeing the children of who they were selling drugs to. They were selling drugs to the parents of those children that are rapping now. So they have these addictions as well. That's what they're exposed to, like these addictions. So that's why you hear a lot of the music now. It's talking about more about, and this is like I said, this is my theory. They're talking more about doing the drugs as opposed to selling the drugs. And once you're doing these drugs, it's an escapism, to some degree, right? It's to it's to get a euphoric feeling about something, right?
Yeah, yeah.
To type of escape. So when you hearing rappers saying, I mean, you have a lot of, one of my favorite rappers who was Future, and all he talks about, at one point in time was just sipping codeine syrup. Like that's what he talked about. But then you see in the interview, he'll say, "Yeah, I don't drink as much as I said I did." Like, but he's perpetuating it, and that's
But
the thing.
but people listening don't
Yeah,
understand
exactly,
that.
exactly. He's perpetuating it because the corporations behind it is like, they, that's what's selling. That's sad, but we live in a capitalistic society. That's what they pushing because there's still some music out there that's conscious, that's
hmm
talking about still the struggle and things like that. But unfortunately, that's not what's selling. So they're gonna keep on pushing, pushing, pushing that type of music in
And
in our faces.
yeah, and I just wonder, Ricardo, did you hear any? I mean, what do you think led you to think that suicide was an answer for you? Do you recall hearing any music, or where did you even get that?
Um, personally, just to kind of go as far as the music and stuff went, I actually didn't listen to a whole lot of rap because back when I was living with my parents, especially around that age, if we didn't have, because my parents are both African, if we didn't have African music going on, we had like Usher or R. Kelly or Maxwell. So not that they didn't talk about things that could be a little bit off the wall sometimes, or they didn't make talk about like love songs or things of that nature. I didn't have a lot of music at the time that was specifically geared toward that until I was about 14 and 15, and internet kind of evolved a little bit more and I could start exploring. So at that point I got into actually a lot of rock music. I was very much into like um, Breaking Benjamin, um, still am, Asking Alexandria, just because they're a very kind of angry kind of group, especially with a lot of the music that I listened to for them back then. So I won't say that music didn't have an impact on me at that time as far as my decision, but compared to a lot of other things that were going on. It was more of a small point in the grand picture of things. So there are definitely still some situations that me as a 25-year-old now, in a better place with a family of my own, I'm still healing and growing from those situations that have happened throughout my life then. But as far as the music and stuff goes, I do agree that you have a lot of people that are talking about, oh, I'm popping this Molly, I'm, doing this drug, I'm doing that or whatever. And personally, they're not necessarily my favorites, but as far as people, like, you have the Kendrick Lamars out there, and even Kendrick Lamar still has his thing, and you have the
And the messaging is out there. And I don't mean to cut you off. I just don't want to run out of time. E.
no,
Stanley Richardson said, there's an African proverb that says that there is no magic more powerful than music. And because we have to start looking at something has gone awry. Because
Yeah.
for all that we have gone through in this country, for suicide to now be, because let's just be honest, when we used to think about or hear that somebody committed suicide, there was just an automatic thing. You knew it was somebody white. You didn't hear about Black people committing suicide.
Mhm.
And so where a shift has happened somewhere.
I mean,
And I
the
don't,
world has expanded. We just, like I'm telling you, we're able. Okay, I'll put it like
and
this. This is
and we don't have I think part of it is we don't have a spiritual foundation anymore either.
well, I would say this: the world has expanded to this point. Us three are on a call right now,
Hmm.
seeing each other. 20 years ago, we would have had to be probably in the same room, right? Or probably like even on the phone. Like it's so easy to just kind of
20
grab
years ago,
someone.
3 years ago, this has happened because of COVID.
Yeah, but I'm just saying. I mean, the
Yeah,
technology was there, but
yeah,
I'm just
yeah,
saying prior
right,
to the
right.
technology, it was just kind of like. I mean, it's just connecting people, and although you're connecting people, are you connecting the right people? Like what people are amongst your circle, right? I mean, you're only as great as your circle, and sometimes people are. I was fortunate. I was fortunate enough to have parents to let me know like movies, video games, music. That's entertainment, right? That's what it is. That's how I looked at it, right? So luckily, I was brought up where it didn't have that much influence on me. I think what the influence it may have is like if I was feeling a certain point, like I was going through a heartbreak or something like that, and somebody came out with a heartbreak, so I'm like, oh, that's telling my life. But it wasn't like the vice versa, where like, oh, this person's talking about heartbreak and I'm happy, but oh, since they're talking about it, let me identify with that type of deal. So and
But
everyone is not fortunate like that. I will concede to that. But I just think we have expanded so much that you have so much noise now. It's so much noise that some people you just cannot mute it.
and so you said earlier, Ronnie, that the toothpaste is out of the tube.
Hmm.
It, that just doesn't feel good. Well, how do we recapture the hearts and minds of people to help them to understand that we all are here with a purpose, and ending it is not the answer? And so, Ricardo, when you were feeling, but at 14 years old and at 5 years old, I remember here in Gainesville, we had a 5 year old under suicide watch. I was like, what bill collector is calling you so much that you need to be on the
Yeah,
suicide watch? You
that's
know?
that's
And
that's
so,
heavy.
yeah, so the influence is coming from somewhere that a 5 year old wants to end their life. And this is just perplexing to me.
Um, I will say, just mainly because I've been in that headspace, a lot of that really starts with at home. And regardless if you have really awesome parents or not so awesome parents, there are still going to be things that even I myself am noticing with my son, that there are going to be things that you miss. You're not always going to be on your best day. And that's just you being human. There's nothing wrong with that. But whenever, especially when it comes to suicide, some people think like, oh, they just woke up and chose that. That's what they did. And that's not the case. Everything, at least for me personally, everything starts with from somewhere. And kind of like what you were saying, as far as like spiritual presence and awareness goes, regardless of what you believe in, that seems to be diminishing more and more, especially with us, at least with us being in the United States, where everything is very, there's a lot of things on top, there's a lot of things going on, but if you dig deeper as America, at America in a whole, there's not a whole lot going on down there. There's not a lot of roots that you have. And the roots that you do find, you either find within different cultures from everywhere else. There's not really much going on as far as like, I am an American and this is what this means. And it's powerful because of this thing. But just to kind of bring it back home, dealing with suicidal thoughts and not having the right environment to speak on that, because you have too many people that are like, oh, we don't really want to talk about death. We don't really want to talk about, mental illness in this capacity. We want to keep it over here where it's not affecting us, where, we see it in the movies, but it's not a real life thing. And that's what's shooting us in the foot. That's why you have people that go out, which for males, firearms are the number one things that we go to whenever we feel that type of way. Luckily for me, I didn't have any access to firearms because at the time we didn't keep guns in the house. But that is the leading cause right there, is not having that environment to sit down like this and have these different conversations and be like, well, why do people get to this particular point in the first place? Is it something at home? Is it the environment? Is it social media? Like you've been saying, is what is in this particular person's life that's really pushing them to that point? Because you don't wake up and choose that kind of thing. Just like you don't necessarily wake up and, choose to have a bad day. You don't just wake up and choose, this is the day that I'm going to do this. These things are a very slow burn thing. So I feel like being able to have an open space that is safe and secure, where you are seeking understanding and not judgment, is what is going to help a lot of people, especially our African American brothers and sisters, that they may feel like, oh, I don't know, we don't really, that's not something that we deal with. This is just a white person thing, or this is just an American thing. It's like, no, this is a people thing. This is about your mind. This is about your heart. This is about your spirit and where you're at. And we want to make sure that every single day that you are loved, you are important, you have a purpose on here, regardless if you know it. My purpose for me is writing. I love writing and I love supporting people in their dreams. I want to make sure that every person that I talk to, no matter how old you are, no matter where you're at, that you understand that what you've got going on for you is special, that the fire that you put out into the world makes a difference, no matter if you see that in the history books or not, whether you become the next Bill Gates or not. You have the fire to really impact people and change their lives and do something that nobody else can do, because there's not going to be another Ronnie Foster Jr. There's not going to be another Miss Pamela D. Marshall. There's not going to be another Ricardo Armando. There's you, and you have that purpose out there. And to be able to talk about mental health and suicide in this particular manner, I feel like if people can have that conversation, we can really change things. We can really impact somebody and guide them away from ending it, because they'll know that they are beautiful, that they are worth it. They're worth those extra steps, no matter where they came from.
Ricardo, that's amazing, and thank you for your vulnerability, and thank you for sharing. Jody Reeves says, so well said. Jody, thank you so much, sweetie, for watching. And Ronnie, as you're listening to him in a little brother kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
do you think about, as a big brother, African American brother, what is it that men in your age group, Ricardo, now men in your age group, can do? Because I think the movement is going to have to be us. Because we now have this medium, I'm not waiting on CNN to do stories on Black folks and suicide. Because I got StreamYard and I can just click the button here. And if I need to sit here every day and do it, then I'm going to do it. Because this, we have, as you said, Ricardo, we have to have a space where we feel comfortable talking about something that's destroying the fiber of our families. And if Black men are being incarcerated, and now the rate of suicide among Black men has doubled, what are our sisters supposed to do? So, as you all are listening and talk, what is it that you see that is a solution? How can the solution start? How can you come forth and help in this crisis?
Um, so I'm a big proponent of just listening to a person, right? And how you approach certain situations. I think that just if I could, for an example, um, sometimes when I ask kids, when I speak to these kids and mentorship opportunities, I never ask what you want to be when you grow up, right? I always ask, what do you like doing? Because that creates a space of creating a foundation for them to keep on trying to do what they like doing, do what makes them happy. Because once you get thrust into this world that will chew you up and spit you out based on what you think you want, what you think is success, what you think is like, oh well, if he got a big house, that's what I gotta have, a big house. And you start putting yourself on this fast track. Or if I don't have this by then something is wrong. Or and so I started to create this space and let them know, like, be as vulnerable as you want. Like, to Ricardo's point, it's not going to be another you. Like, you are the best you in the world. Like,
Mm,
there's no right. You're the best you in the
mm,
world, no
I
matter what
love
you
that.
do. You're the best you in the world. So it's like
Mm,
you create that space for people to like, okay, it's okay for me. If a person wanted to be a dancer, that's what they wanted to be, but they couldn't say they want to be a dancer when they grow up because that's not a good. They don't make a lot of money. So it's like, let me say I want to be a doctor, and then they start dealing with the stresses of not being happy pursuing that goal that other people put on them of being a doctor. And now that's another level of stress that they have to deal with, that you're going through life not being happy. We don't have, and not to sound corny, but at the end of the day, you do want to be happy. You do want to be
mhm,
fulfilled. And
Hmm.
it took me a moment. It took me years, up honestly, up until what 2019, February 2019, when it was like, okay, that's when I really started going towards the path of fulfillment. On the outside, it's looking good. I had my own this, I own that, not my own place and things like that. I had my own insurance, getting a check every 2 weeks, living, I guess, comfortable, but it was a level of fulfillment. And someone else can take that and be like, nah, that's not fulfilling me and making me happy. And that can be a level of pressure on someone. And once you start feeling like that, you, like I said, you get back into that funk. And that's why I didn't want to get back into that funk of just feeling like every day was a gloomy day, every day was a cloudy day. Like, no matter what happens, it's like, oh, something's wrong, something always gonna fall. So I just try to create that space and being a listening ear sometimes, because, like, as Ricardo was speaking, like, I can't speak from that perspective, but being here to help, to hear him and just let him know that, okay, it's okay to be vulnerable. Because everyone says, oh, I don't judge, but don't judge, because you never know what somebody's going through. You never know what somebody. If I saw him walking down the street, I would have never guessed, like, oh, that guy tried to commit suicide. I had to mentor a guy, a young individual, just last year. He's a sophomore in high school, and he was going through the same thing. Like, he told me before he even told his parents, well, that he tried to do that once upon a time. Because I gave him that space to let him
mm,
know, like, man, listen, I'm here to try to help you out of situations, not to try to put more dirt on you.
mm,
Yeah, that is definitely very important. I 100% feel that because, like you said, whenever you are in that space, especially once you get to high school, that is the biggest question, especially start when you start getting to your senior year. What do you want to do? Where do you want to go to college? What, this, that, or whatever. And it feels like everything is on this time block. Like, you have to get it done. Or otherwise, if I'm not done with school by 22, or if I'm not getting into my master's, then, I'm not doing what I need to do in life. I'm failing in life. And it's like, no, that's not it. The way that I break down time is this: time really only is relevant whenever you are inserting yourself into an event. So, i.e., this particular uh, thing we got going on here with the podcast. Miss Pamela invited me and said, "Hey, make sure you're here, 15 minutes before." And I had a little bit of issues just signing in, but I decided I wanted to be here, and she invited me. So that's where time is important. And then also, going to work, making sure that you're going in because you need that to survive. But everything else, whether it be, college or your passions or your dreams, those don't have a time limit. There's no reason why you need to put a time limit on those things. You don't have to get this big house by 25 and be making $1 million by 30 and retiring at 40 and this, that, or whatever. That's, that works for some people, but that doesn't necessarily work for everybody. And then being able to have that space open up, like sitting there and genuinely saying, I like how you said that you don't ask people what they want to be, but you ask them what you want to do. And one of the questions that I ask is, what's your passion?
Mm-hmm.
What do you enjoy like getting into? Because that's different from what you want to do. Because you might want to be a doctor because they pay well, but you might really love acting, and that might not pay well at the beginning because not everybody's going to be Leonardo DiCaprio when they start out. But
because he wasn't either, right?
Yeah, he wasn't Leonardo DiCaprio.
That's right. There's different levels, and I find that you find that fulfillment, you find that peace whenever you are working hard towards something that you want to do. Because I can guarantee you that if you try and tell somebody to do something that they don't want to do, they're not going to do it at 100%, if at all. That's just the nature of things.
Mm-hmm.
And to have that space to be able to open up and say, this is what I want to do, and I want to take these different steps, put somebody at ease. It gives them comfort because they're like, my voice and what I'm feeling matters to this person or to this community, and they want to see me succeed. So it gives them fire to be able to do other things, and it can push them off the brink because they know that, hey, I can go to this person or I can go to this community and speak on that. Just a small. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, as we're talking, and we've been on now for 37 minutes, it is said that every 11 seconds, 3 people in the United States complete their suicide.
Wow.
So we've had 3 people commit suicide while we've been on here. I pray for those 3 people. And then every 73 seconds, there is an attempt, a suicide attempt in the United States of America, in a country where we have on our currency, "In God We Trust." This is very sad for me because we don't know who's hurting. And as you said, Ronnie, you would have never guessed that with Ricardo. And how do we open up this space and drop the stigma of mental illness, drop the stigma of being judged or finding the people that won't judge you when you just say, help me, I need some help. Because there are so many people hurting, and they're hurting in silence, as well as families who have had family members to commit suicide. In my family, I had an uncle who committed suicide. 20 years later, his son committed suicide. And there was no dialogue about it. No dialogue. And so maybe if they had talked about the daddy, then maybe the son would not have. And it's even uncomfortable for me to say it because we're uncomfortable talking about it, but we have to save lives. And Rhonda Turner from Nashville is watching. She said, young men representing.
I think I've heard of her before.
You've heard of her?
Yeah, I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's a nice lady, isn't she?
Thank you.
So as I said, as we hear these numbers and we know that it's going on even as we're talking, we don't have any time to spare. We don't have any time to waste.
Yeah, that is very true. We don't really have time to waste because, like you said, an estimated 11 seconds, you have 3 people that have already gone through. 73, you have more people that are attempting. And beyond that, you have several people that are thinking about it. So It's like, what do we do to be able to say, hey, how do we bring these numbers down? How do we bring these statistics down? Well, one is, besides looking at the number of statistics, is just what I feel like is just having more conversations open up in a safe space, because sometimes what people I think get confused is, oh, I'm going to open up a space for people to talk about it. But when you jump into confrontation mode, then it's like, once you're being confronted, some people shut down, some people bite back, and then at that point, you're not getting anything situated. So, yeah, you open up a space, but you're not doing anything if you're going to jump in and be like, well, why are you having these thoughts? Why are you doing this, that, or whatever? There's no reason that you should be feeling this way because you have this, and this. That's not opening up a safe space. That's just that's giving into the fear of what might happen to this person. And that for me is not okay. Another thing for me that is not okay, even though Hollywood has gotten a little bit better with it recently, the movie Joker that came out actually wasn't too bad as far as presenting schizophrenia in a way that wasn't super glammed up. But then again, it also is still Hollywood, and Joaquin Phoenix, even though he did a phenomenal job in that position, it's still Hollywood. He was still playing the Joker, which is a Batman supervillain for those of you that aren't familiar. But is to not pay attention to what is being presented in the movies, because a lot of the times on their best days, those are very extreme cases that happen to be rare, especially when you come into schizophrenia. Those happen to be very rare cases. Or even when you get into things with suicide, regardless if you're dealing with mental illness or not, those can be very extreme situations that don't always happen. There are some movies that are very true to that. There are some TV shows that are very true to that, and maybe even pay homage to a few different tragic situations as to bring up awareness. But the more important thing is to have conversations with people that are going through that. Because I have clinical depression, but that doesn't mean that every single day of my life, there's a rain cloud over it and I'm having really, really dark thoughts. Happens sometimes, but not all the time. So having those conversations to understand, this is how this person's mind is working, and to see how their spirit is working, that really brings a lot in there. And then even speaking on spirit is just letting people be people, just viewing them in that light.
Ronnie, Ricardo, do you have somebody that you can call when you're in that dark time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good.
I have a couple of people. I have my wife. I have a best friend of mine. I have two best friends, both Evie and Leola, which they've been my best friends since high school. So if I'm ever going through a dark situation like that, I can call them. And then I have my brother, Aiden, and I have my spiritual brother, Noah, that I can always reach out to and say, hey, I'm not doing too well. Or one of my code words is, I've run out of spoons. And it came from a story that I listened to a while back, kind of dealing with body dysmorphia and the way that the mindscape works. But using that particular phrase, it's like, oh, let's talk for a minute. Let's see what's going on. So I have those people in my life, thankfully.
Ronnie, listening, what are your thoughts in listening and hearing Ricardo?
I guess my initial thoughts are what would be ideal for him. Like, even when he goes back to that 14-year-old that made that attempt, what would have gotten him out of making that attempt, right? Like, what environment did he need? My mind is a solution oriented mind. So when I hear a problem or some problem, I'm trying to think, okay, how can we, attack that? I hate saying attack, but solve that with that person's help, and not putting him in a place where, like, well, Ricardo, I mean, you got friends, right? Why, if you needed some money, you could have just called me, and like he said, put him in that attack space. Like, oh no, I mean, what can we do to help? And that's the first thing that came to my mind is like when someone he said he's he's diagnosed clinical depressed. It's like what what helps him, right?
Hmm.
And I think I mean because there's only so much I could say from this side of the fence, um, that I can identify with that, right? And I think that if someone who has walked those shoes can say, well, this would have helped me out, right? This would have made those shoes feel better, I should say. And we could provide that those tools. I think that's what was going through my mind, just kind of what would have helped
Yeah.
to even prevent that.
Ricardo and Ronnie, I really thank you. And that you put that question out there. So Ricardo, if you can just give some ideas of what people can do. Well, you did say be open up with non-judgmental spaces and not finger pointing and not from a perspective, as Ronnie said, I haven't been in your shoes. So I can't say, why don't you do this or why don't you do that or why haven't you?
Or before you,
But
I
just
got a
being
question.
compassionate. Go ahead.
Well, so like prior to when you were 14 and
Yeah.
you made that attempt, did you feel that you didn't have anyone to talk to, or you didn't know that's what you needed? Right? Like, was it that you were in a space like I don't know what I need, but I just gotta escape, or is it like I want to talk to people about this, but I don't feel comfortable about it?
Um, it was a mixture of both because for me personally, the environment that I was continually in was very toxic. There is a lot of walking on eggshells and a lot of manipulation, gaslighting,
Hmm.
a lot of different things going on there to where in my mind, I thought that I was always wrong about the way that I saw things. Even if logically I knew I was correct about certain things, logically or emotionally and spiritually, I had already been told that you're wrong, you're a liar, these things don't happen. You're making things bigger than what they need to be. Um, I didn't do it that much, or blah 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 blah. I'm
Hmm.
not going to necessarily get into that because into the specifics of those situations, mainly because I'm not trying to put. I'm not out here coming out for anybody, because
Understood. Understood.
but for me personally, what I needed was a new environment
Okay.
to be able to explore and to be able to say, I am feeling this way and I need help to not feel the way that I'm feeling, because my heart and my spirit were hurting daily. And it felt like there's just this darkness that was always like pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing until it got to the point where it was just like, I need to go. I cannot to be here. I'm one of those that even now to this day, if I am shut down in like mid conversation, especially if I'm super excited about something,
Hmm.
um, not right now, but like if I'm super excited about something and somebody's just like, well, I've got this thing to talk about and that's what I'm talking about right now. So we're not going to worry about your thing. I'm like, all right, fine. That's cool. I shut down very quickly when I'm presented with that. So if I were to walk into a confrontational environment and try to bare my soul like that, then I'll be like, don't worry about it. It's fine. I'm not going to bring it up to you ever again. It's cool,
While
because
the cloud is still there.
the cloud is definitely, it's still there and I won't open up. And a lot of people I've realized, at least with what I've worked with in the past, are like that. Like the minute that you shut them down, especially when they start opening up about their emotions, their feelings, what's going on with their spirit, they're like, "That's cool. Never mind. Don't worry about it. I'm not going to talk to you about it anymore. It's fine. I don't want to. I don't want to get on your business. You're doing your thing." And they won't talk to you about it. They will always tell you, "I'm good. I'm fine. No, I'm okay. It's
Mm.
cool." They always hit you with that. And even if you know something is not wrong, they're not going to open up because that door is already closed to them in their minds. Uh, so personally, it's just listening definitely helps. And even if you haven't been in that particular mindscape like you have, Ronnie, uh, just being there, because everybody has something that they can connect to, and I'm very connection relationship oriented. So everybody has a story to tell, and everybody has some point that they can say, oh, I see what this person is going through from this perspective, but not exactly from this one. So maybe you have dealt with clinical depression or dealt with a depression of some sort, but maybe you haven't dealt with suicide. But we connect at this point of depression. Like we have that experience together. Or, maybe you have issues with anger, and maybe this other person has issues with paranoia, and maybe you don't ever really cross paths, but you do have something going on there that you guys can connect with. I feel like everybody has some point that they can connect with. So finding those different connections and meeting up in the middle, I feel like helps out a lot. So it doesn't matter really what walk of life you're coming from. I feel like everybody has somewhere on their path something that they can say, I don't understand how you're feeling because I haven't walked that path, but this is kind of what I went through and I can connect with you on that. So let's start here and let's build this way together. Let's, walk together and figure out where we can go.
All right. Well said.
Gentlemen, I really, really appreciate it. I feel like you are my sons, and I think from the village perspective, we all have to open up our aprons and welcome and be available to those that may not even look like they need any help, but they're holding it in, as Ricardo said. That cloud is there, but just to be available to listen and keep each other prayed up, covered and prayed up. And I just want to thank you all for sharing tonight. I hope the listeners will share. I hope things were said that can help save some lives, because that is the only reason that we're doing this, is because there are lives that need to be saved. And you all have played a role in that tonight. And I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Go ahead. Were you about to say something?
yes, just really quick, because I know that we probably have some families out there that have children or family members that have committed suicide. But
Mm-hmm.
at least one thing that I want to say, especially with parents that really have worked hard, because sometimes you get caught up with, I wish I could do more. And I think us as a human race can always do more. But the thing that I want to say is that you guys are loved too. Like the victims of, a family or a family member or a friend that has dealt with suicide, it you don't have to bear that burden alone. You don't have to keep that in. Talk to somebody else too, because we don't want to see you on the next statistics either. You are important too. So if you have any friends or family members that have gone down that path and have committed suicide, it's important to open up in your own way. Don't feel forced to do so, but don't hold it in either. Because speaking as someone that has held a lot of different things in, it will eat you up alive. And you will always have these different, what if I did, or what if I didn't? Ease into it and let your soul be healed. Find that person that you can really work through it with, so that way you can get to a better place and live your life for the person that is no longer here, because I feel like that's what they would want you to do. So live your life for them, in place of them at that point.
Ricardo, thank you for that. Living our lives with purpose. Guys, again, thank you so much. We have been talking about suicide prevention. The statistics are very, very gloomy, but I am inspired by these two young men that have shared with us tonight. And I thank them again. And I thank you all so much for watching. We will be back here tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock for the Timbuktu Report. And I do hope you will join us. In the meantime, take care of you, love you, and let's know that we all came here with a purpose and nobody can do it better than you, right, Ronnie?
Correct.
Nobody can be a better you than
Hey,
you.
you're the best. You're the best you in the world.
You're the best you in the world. Thank you for that, Ronnie. Thank you, Ricardo. Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow night. I'm Pamela Marshall at the Wellness Radio TV and at the Wellness Radio TV podcast. Remember, there is healing at the well. Rhonda Turner says, be gentle with yourself. Do that. Do that. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.